Hello and welcome to the Saxophone Study Guide for the Memorial High School Band Audition 2020. I'm Dr. Alexander Richards. Before we begin, let's make sure that we've numbered every single one of our measures because this etude is somewhat long and we need to make sure we can jump to specific measures when I mention them. This piece is in concert F, which is D major for alto and baritone saxophones and G major for tenor. Make sure that you know the scale and the arpeggio, which is the first, third, and fifth note of the scale that you are playing. For D major, that is D, F sharp, and A, from low D all the way to the palm key and back down. And for G, that is G, B, and D. This etude is in 6/8 time, which tells us that we need to be counting 6/8 per bar. However, the meter above it tells us that we need to be playing this with a pulse of dotted quarter notes. That means when we count, we'll be emphasizing eighth notes 1 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's imperative that we maintain this good pulse all the way through. 6/8 is traditionally used for dances or a musical joke, which is called a scherzo. Make sure that you maintain a light style all the way through. For certain measures, I would highly recommend that you count all 6 beats, particularly measures 9, 11, 13, and 15. You'll notice that we have to do 16th notes on the second 8th note of the count. In this case, because we're counting eighth notes, they will be counted as 2 and. Because remember, a 16th note is half the value of an eighth note. These measures can be counted 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6 and. Again, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6 and. The other tricky rhythm that we have to work on is in measure 21, where we have a dotted eighth followed by 3/16. Remember that the dot next to the note adds 1/2 of the value to it. So in this case, because it's on an eighth note, we'll be adding an additional 16th note to the eighth note. So we have 3/16 notes. Make sure that you're counting 4 and 5 and 6 and. Count all of the 16th notes when you're learning to play this rhythm. Otherwise, it's really easy to crush the last 3 notes of the measure, do blah, and we don't want that because otherwise you're not playing in time. Speaking of rhythms, we have some tricky rhythms in this piece because of the addition of grace notes. These can be found in measures 22, 24, and 30. For the grace notes in measure 22 and 30, we want to steal time and make sure that beat 6 in measure 22 is right on time. So to do this, the grace notes are actually going to be before the beat. So 4, 5, and a 6. We're going to put the grace notes inside of beat 5, and we're robbing time from beat 5 to make sure that 6 is right in time. The same applies to measure 30, where we want beat 4 to be in time so we can maintain our nice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feel. In this case, I would play all 4 grace notes on beat 3 so that beat 4 was perfectly in time. 1, 2, 3, and a 4, 5, 6. This, of course, differs in measure 24. I know it doesn't seem like it's written any differently, but because it is the same note twice, we want to try and put the F sharp grace note right on the beat. So I would play it as a full eighth note followed by a quarter note. 1, 2, 3. It just gives a better sense of resolution at the end of a variation. Speaking of variations, you'll notice that each of these sections of 8 bars is a theme followed by 3 variations. Make sure that the style remains consistent even when we get extra notes. Make sure that your dynamics remain consistent and you're not adding extra dynamics towards the end to make it more exciting. Remember, forte should be forte, especially when you're presenting the material for the first time in the theme. Dynamics are going to be super important in this. Make sure that we can hear you when you record playing every dynamic from forte all the way to piano. This is especially important when we have to go from forte to piano, like in measure 12 to 13, and in the last two notes of the piece. Make sure that they are a good piano and that we can actually hear the difference. Everyone can play forte, not everyone can play a good piano. In variation 3, it's important that we bring out the accents. They may look a little tricky, but if we look closely, we can see that they're on the 8th note count. In this way, we have to use our breath to accent them and not try to do a thuddy, a harder, or a fatter tongue. Each 8th note beat will have a little decrescendo on it, so that the first half of the beat, the accented note, stands out from the second half of the beat, which, as you might notice, is the same throughout. This is called a sostenuto. Each 8th note will have the shape of 2, 2, 2, while the offbeat will fit into that decrescendo, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. I would recommend practicing this without the saxophone or without your fingers, making sure that you can just tongue with even breath and not getting overexcited and squeaking when you go for the accent. I will now play this etude on alto, tenor, and baritone saxophone at dotted quarter equals 60. This has been the Saxophone Study Guide for the Memorial High School Band Audition 2020. I'm Dr. Alexander Richards. Happy practicing!